Doug, the Saudis and their allies have some very clear demands of what they want. They're showing no signs of backing down. Are these demands actually realistic?
Well, the demands themselves, even the U.S. State Department acknowledges that they have to be reasonable, which is a sign that the Washington is basically saying some of those demands are probably unrealistic. Among them, shutting down the state-controlled Al Jazeera news network, which is based in Doha, Qatar. You know, one of the reasons that they don't seem to be backing down at all, the Gulf states led by Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates. Why should they? From their perspective, they have a very sympathetic ear in the White House in the name of Donald Trump. You know, ever since that visit that Donald Trump paid to Riyadh on his first big foreign tour last month in late May, where he stood up there in front of a hall of Arab autocrats and basically said, you know, I'm on your side in the fight against terror, putting really new wind in the sails of regimes which had, if not been in disgrace, at least had gotten a little bit of a cold shoulder from the Obama administration in the later days. These are regimes which in many cases are conducting very oppressive or repressive policies, which are disregarding, at best, human rights. Donald Trump hasn't talked about any of that. He has been very much foursquare behind them. So from where they stand, the Saudis have been sort of shrugging off any threats from, say, the State Department, trying to get all sides back to the table. There had been the Republican chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, a man named Bob Corker, basically had sent a letter to Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, perhaps by way of trying to support him in his mediation efforts, saying that he would block any future arms sales to the Gulf states, whether it's Saudi Arabia or its allies or even Qatar, until he sees some sort of path forward for a resolution. So trying to get something going there. But the fact of the matter is, you go to Riyadh right now, you go to King Salman, he knows that he has the ear of the most powerful man in the world. As long as Donald Trump is on his side, he figures, why should he back down? You know, he has all the cards in his hand right now. So it's interesting. And like I said, you know, you mentioned this before, that the United Arab Emirates ambassador to Russia told the Guardian newspaper in an interview that they're thinking of imposing fresh sanctions. They're thinking of telling their trading partners, you either do business with us, you have to choose, or you do business with Qatar. So very far from showing that they're ready to sit around a table and negotiate, they're doing just the opposite. They're digging their heels, and they're hoping that their sympathy factor with Donald Trump is going to help carry the day.
As you say there, Doug, negotiations clearly have a long way to go. We've got Donald Trump, the State Department, and Rex Tillerson. At all times, they're not singing from the same hymn sheet, are they?
Yeah, and this is very interesting, you know, and we've seen this time and again, not just on the policy with Qatar, but with respect to, say, Russia/Ukraine policies. We've had one message coming out of the White House, and in this case, we were just talking about it, Donald Trump being very much fully behind Egypt, Saudi Arabia, that Gulf grouping, and very much against Iran, demonizing Iran, and demonizing now Qatar as well. And on the other side, you have both the State Department, but also the Pentagon, right, the Defense Department, which is trying to pursue a balanced, as it sees it, foreign policy, trying to resolve a crisis, which at the end of the day, the United States, it's in their interest to resolve. They have their largest air base in the Mideast, based in Qatar, 11,000 U.S. military personnel, a base from which missions to fight, as the U.S. sees it, terrorists and extremists in whether we're talking about Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen, all of it takes off from that base, or a lot of it. So they really want to get this crisis resolved. They want to get all sides back together. But they are not seeing eye to eye, at least from a lot of the statements we've been hearing in recent days and weeks, with the White House on this. You could say it's common, it's typical for the White House and its State Department to have nuances or differences in policy. We saw that in the Obama administration. That's nothing new, but it's the sharp contrast in the message coming out. And I will note that Rex Tillerson himself is trying to do a lot of damage control. He would say, if you put this question to him, there is no daylight between me and my boss, the president. We see eye to eye on this issue. But behind the scenes, there's obviously a lot of patching things up and trying to iron things out, because there are policy differences, at least in the statements that have been made and the things Donald Trump has tweeted.
All right, Doug, thank you for that analysis amid an intensifying diplomatic row.